Mike. First of all, indeed it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I've been in the audience here for a couple other Faith and Ales. I wish, unfortunately, my schedule allowed me to be here on a more frequent basis. JP has certainly kept me abreast of it. But it really is a wonderful thing that's going on in this community. I've lived in other areas, and I've never been a part of a community that has something like this. And for Catholic gentlemen, I know I grew up in a family where my father was very supportive of our church, worked as a church as a volunteer, and still is very involved as a member of Knights of Columbus, and with that, understand how important this is for us. And hopefully what I talk a little bit about tonight will be just an understanding of that, where I came from and where I am right now, based on great people in my life, a lot of men that led me in ways that have allowed me to do things and given me some thoughts and guidance that I hope I'm now using to, as they say, pay it forward to the next generation. To just simplify a little bit for you, I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, outside of New York City. Very proud Yankee fan, although the Mets are ruling New York right now. I take a little bit of excitement with that the Mets third base coach right now, Tim Tuffle, who played for them when they won the World Series in 1986. He was the second baseman, Wally Backman. They beat bat against lefties, and Wally would bat against righties and won a World Series ring. He is doing well, and although on the other side of my family, my wife's from Chicago area, my daughter lives in Chicago, it's conflicted. We have 4 children, and the youngest of our 4, the youngest of our 2 twins, was a black sheep of my family because he got somehow contaminated by my brother, my uncle, and somebody else in terms of being a Mets fan. So he's been waiting all these years. We can still think back to 2002 when the Yankees played the Mets, and it hadn't gone very well for him. So I think last night was the first chance in a while to have some excitement. But Tim Tuffle's just a great guy, and he was teasing me about a year ago. His 2 other friends we grew up playing baseball with were reminding him that I'm a big Yankee fan. So he sends me a note. He's at Yankee Stadium, goes up through the dugouts, and takes a picture of Yankee Stadium saying, "Get ready for the sweep." And I didn't really know it, but then I found out these other guys. Well, 2 things happened. One, I did remind him he grew up a Yankee fan like I did. It wasn't until the Mets started writing his name on checks he started rooting for the other team. I was really good at it back then because the Yankees swept the Mets that particular week, and they didn't send me another picture after it was all over. But growing up where I did, my parents were really young when they were born. My father was 21 or 22. My mom was 18 or 19. They were the oldest in their families. My father's parents, both my grandmother and grandfather, came off the boat from Ireland. My grandfather died when my father was only 16. The oldest of 3 boys was in a position where my father loved sports, was a very good athlete from what his friends tell me, but he had to sacrifice early on. First, he didn't play high school sports. CYO was very big back then, and he played around the world and so forth, and played fast pitch and so forth. But he did a lot of sacrifice, and then when he started his family, we had 4 of us out of our 5 on a real quick basis. No twins at that time, but kind of like Irish twins in the way things work. And I was at a very young age around my father quite a bit because he was, besides working in New York City on Wall Street, he'd come off the train, and the first thing he would do during the summers, he'd be coaching a baseball team on Sunday mornings, Mondays, and Thursdays. It seemed like Tuesdays and Wednesdays he was working at the church. And I was around him around the athletic fields. He also was a basketball referee in the winter. So whether I was at the basketball games, keeping score, or being a ball boy, whether during the summer I was a Little League, his baseball teams as a bat boy and so forth, I just was around him. My grandfather on my mother's side, played college basketball in Pennsylvania. He was a referee. I had an uncle who was really more like an older brother to me, and he was playing sports. So for me, sports was really all I remembered as a kid. And then I had my father's youngest brother, became a baseball coach and athletic director at Loyola, Maryland. And so at an early age, I gave the thought process, geez, I'm not good enough to play college. I definitely won't be making any money off of it, but maybe I could do something in athletics, whether I work in an organization and so forth. So at an early age, I was doing that. But by being around my father quite a bit, he obviously became a role model for me. And the things that I did, the baseball team that we happened to be associated with, that I was the bat boy for, was the Knights of Columbus. And so I was around the Knights as a kid. And when I was 18, it was just a natural thing that we all joined the Knights. And I wish the next generation of these kids, we could start getting them away from their cell phones and their computers, and we could get more kids into the Knights of Columbus if we could. And I see a few folks here at the end. So I'm in a scenario where I could have probably played a little minutes at a Division III basketball school up in Maine. I was in southeast New England here in New York, and I had a cousin who happened to live up there. 3 or 4 had moved up there, and I asked him about it, and he said, "You don't like the cold?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you're not coming here." Because he said it was so cold just walking from your classroom to the gym, it wouldn't have been worth it. So I wound up going to Boston College for my undergrad, and while I was there, I still had some inkling that maybe I'd want to do it. So I started volunteering at BC in a lot of different ways with sports information. And I was involved in intramurals as both a participant and as official, and eventually as a student assistant. And within that, again, was working the background of, what did I want to do? What do you want to do? And kids are asking in college right now, what do you want to do? And I hope they find out soon because bills are getting high. So I was getting a business degree because I thought I wanted to be in administration for athletics, but my father basically said, "Listen, if you're going to go to school, get another degree. If you want to get in athletics, like my brother did, and after being a baseball coach and then an AD for 3 years, he got let go. He was in a situation where he got the AD's job because there was a 3-person vote, 2 board of trustees and the president. The 2 trustees liked him, and the president really was interested in somebody else. But the trustees rolled off, and 3 years later, he rolled off. So my father was understandably concerned that I got into a profession that didn't have a lot of security. And he said, if you go get a business degree, then, eventually you can do what you want to do. And I think what he was really saying, get your business degree, in 4 years from now, you can figure out the real world and go get a job somewhere else. So I did what I needed to do for my academics. I wound up being in a position where I got experience as a student, and I still had to get, so as I finished up my BC degree, I started looking at some graduate schools, and there was, at that time, maybe 3 or 4 in the country that had sports administration programs. Unfortunately, now there's way too many. There's a lot of kids graduating with sports administration degrees that really, quite frankly, don't have much of a chance of getting a job. And I think schools are doing a disservice because they're giving kids degrees without really giving them an opportunity to get into the workforce and just making money off them. But so as it was at that time, there was 2 or 3, and I actually got waiting lists at University of Massachusetts, UMass, and Ohio University. And when I didn't get the jobs, or excuse me, I didn't get the opportunities there, I was pretty heartbroken. I was like, shoot, this is going to be my way to get in. I remember coming home, and my mother, who is quieter in our family in terms of how we were doing our lives, she just said, there's a plan for you. And if you really just understand that, just put faith first, that you'll be able to figure it out. And with that, gave me a little bit of confidence. And then I started at my parents' living room. I started writing letters to colleges, in particular proteins, for jobs. And I now compared to computers. I mean, those of us who use kids don't even know what typewriters are nowadays. So I'm sitting there as a product of Catholic high school, and all I'm doing is pecking away. I never took typing class. And, I miss it, the whiteout and all the rest of that. And I wound up sending out about 90 letters. And in the course of those 90 letters, about half of the people replied. And there were some really big names back then that were in management, Bart Starr, among some others. So I got some really nice autographs that I still have. There weren't any jobs. But it just so happened around then that where we lived, there was a great football player who was the general manager, ex-general manager of the Giants by the name of Andy Robustelli. And Andy Robustelli lived in the next town over from where I lived, and he happened to be related to a good family friend. And through my father, I got an opportunity to meet with him just to kind of ask him some questions. And again, this is, I think, my father was, he's going to hear some answers, and he's finally going to go on with his life and get a real job. So I met with Mr. Robustelli, and he was asking me what I was doing. I explained what my process was in terms of my job prospects. And he said, well, think about it. You're going, I think, a little bit about the wrong way. There's only so many opportunities in pro sports. There's more colleges than pros. And think about the pros. Unless you want to work in the minor leagues, most of these organizations are family run. You got the Maras running the Giants. You got the Roonies running the Steelers and so forth. And I'm like, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. So I did then start to write to a few more schools, and it just so happened the very next week, I had an opportunity in the paper where it said that Yale University just hired a new basketball coach, and I was living not too far from there. So I sent a letter in saying, I played high school basketball, I've been involved at the college level administratively a little bit, and I was hoping I could become a graduate assistant. Now, I didn't think at the time, in order to be a graduate assistant, you got to get into Yale. There's no way I was going to get into Yale, but nobody was rude enough to tell me that. So I sent the letter off, And about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call, not from the basketball coach, but from a person who was an administrator, saying that they had gotten my letter, that they were in a situation looking for an intern, and would I be interested in. And sure enough, I got an opportunity to work at Yale. I worked there for 3 years. It was a great experience. And even though I was from Connecticut, and I played some high school sports in New Haven where Yale was, I'd never really been on the campus. So it was a historic place to be while I was there. I had responsibilities for dealing with home game management, running the Yale Bowl, which in itself was an icon place to be, although we played games there, and my alma mater, BC, came in to play one time with Doug Flutie, and the place seats about 70,000, a little more when you put in extra seats. There was about 40,000 there, which was a good crowd, but looked half empty. The next week we played Columbia, and there was like literally 9,000 people there. And I mean, it looked like not even an exhibition game. And the only thing I remember about that game, besides it was a small crowd, is Columbia literally had 7 people in their band. And they spelled out the letters lines. First the L, then the I, then the O, then the S. And when they got done, they walked down to the goalpost, hit the goalpost, and all 7 fell down. So there was some interesting experience. And then at the end of that year, we happened to have Harvard, our tribal. It was a 100th Harvard-Yale game. And in a position where it was just a great crowd, 75,000. Again, for some of you from the Northeast, you may remember the Giants and the Jets used to play their exhibition game at Yale Bowl a bit. And within it, when the Giants and Jets would play, they would take snow fences and put it around the outer part of the field because they had stairs that walked right down. If you did, you're going to imagine New York Jets and Giant fans having access to a field. So they didn't let it, but when we were playing, we had an athletic director by the name of Frank Ryan, who had been a great quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, but the guy had no personality, and he was so cheap. He didn't want us to spend the money on the fence. So what we had, the other thing he wouldn't let us do, you see all the time now for an extra point or for a field goal, they put the nets up in the back. And that's been up there for a long time. Now, more recently, marketers are putting All-State and other things up there. But Frank would not let us put nets up there because he didn't want to go to the expense. Yet at the same time, he wanted to see every ball back. So it was a little kind of hard to figure out. So thankfully, a number of our games, we didn't draw that much, like I said earlier. So I could take it, and I had it roped off where nobody could be there except for, I had a lot of athletes that were, because they were on the work stay, would work there. And I put them around there so they could grab the balls. Because if you didn't, the inner city kids from New Haven, they had it, and it was a ball. They got up and down, and within 10 seconds, it was down the street. And I think the first game, we lost like 4 or 5. That's when I came up with that strategy to go around there. And I had one guy who was a freshman basketball player who was about 6'9". He just sat in the middle. And the responsibility, all he had was to get it to him because he was older, and then he'd throw it to the field. That one guy turned out to be a guy named Chris Dudley, who played in the NBA. Had a really good career, but he was also, I think, the only guy that was a worse foul shooter than Shaq in his career. So Chris is a brilliant guy from San Diego, and we went through that process. But for the Harvard-Yale game, there was no issues with that. It was a sellout. And at the end of the game, we had made some decisions ahead of time. What were we going to do? And you've seen a lot of issues over the years. A lot of us remember, the tearing of the goalposts, and that's a tradition that was just one of America's dumbest traditions, in my opinion. So they have a scenario where at the end of the game, Harvard beats us. They storm the field, even though they're the visiting team. They had enough fans, and they tear the goalposts down. And I go out of the bowl for where my office was, and then I hear that there's an ambulance on the field. And I don't remember a player getting hurt at the end of the game, and why would he still be on the field? No, the goalpost came down and hit a girl in the back of the head. And she had been, unfortunately, inebriated, wasn't paying attention with her friend. Goalpost came down, hit her in the head. And the first report I get is she's dead on arrival at the hospital. And I'm in charge of the bowl. I'm 22 years old, and I'm really working on my faith right then and there. And went to the hospital, and thankfully the original thought process for whoever relayed it was wrong, but she was in very bad shape. She eventually was in a coma. Thankfully, she did come out of it about a week or 2 or 3 later, and she did have to go through a lot of rehab, but she was in a position where I reached out to her actually over the last couple of years. I heard about it. There was another incident at Yale a few years ago with the Harvard-Yale game. It was actually something in their parking lot. But this incident came about, so it allowed me to reach out to her. But the piece of that one was, it tripped me a couple different things in regards to just my career. You never know when your life's going to change, for whether it was going to be her or even my own career. There was a lawsuit that was involved, and we were thankfully indemnified. But the reason we had that issue was because Frank Ryan wouldn't let us keep those fences around there. And he also wouldn't let we couldn't protect the goalposts. I mean, there's no way to protect them. an onslaught of people. So, I've always tried to maintain safety first whenever we have kids, and that's the first thing we try to teach them. But that's the main thing I try to feel every day as an athletic director: safety. The young men and women that are working in our program as student athletes, or people that work with us, we try to make sure we put safety first, because I don't ever want to be in a situation where I could have anyway been negligent in that regard. So I'm at there, and I'm finally in a position where I decide I want to be an athletic director. And other than knowing I had a relative who was one, I didn't really know what you needed. And I looked into what we had as a job opportunities in our NCAA group that we get every week. And it talked about that for most jobs it was a bachelor's required, but a master's preferred. So with that, I said, I'm young and single, I can do what I want. I have 51% of the vote when I'm married and 49% on a good day. So I went and looked at some schools that I could get an MBA, and I could also get good experience, hopefully working at another school, because I was actually leaving the workforce, which in our business is hard enough to get in. So I was really blessed through friends at Yale. They connected me with a friend who was a lacrosse coach at Notre Dame to get an opportunity to work at Notre Dame. It was two of the best years of my life. The best thing that came out of it wasn't my degree, which was something I appreciated, but I got to meet my wife there. She was a student at St. Mary's College, and I was very blessed to meet Mary, and in turn was able to then have the opportunity to share my life with somebody else. And eventually now we have, as I said, we have 4 children. And as each step of my career moved forward, the things that I did were mainly with a lot of confidence, because I was in a field that was hard to get into, and then I left it, and then I got back into it through some luck, and I got an opportunity at Bowling Green University. But the one thing I didn't have ever was a lack of confidence, because I've always was taught as a young person. And I think that confidence goes back into the faith in yourself, but I think the faith in yourself can't really be true unless you have faith in God. So throughout my career, what I've done is I've tried to based on that. I've been in a position, I've been really blessed to move along the way. From Bowling Green, I went to Bradley University. I was there for 13 years, had a wonderful time, and then I happened to come down here 7 years ago. But the piece that started all this really was when I met Mary. We had a honeymoon pregnancy, and we were so excited, and 9 months afterwards, or maybe 8 months, I'm in New Orleans at a conference, and this is well before cell phones, and I get a phone call from to the hotel, and a friend of mine that I was sharing a room with told me at the conference that I had a call, and I needed to call my wife right away. There was an emergency. I had no idea what was up, but I knew she was 8 months pregnant. So I contacted her, and the bottom line of it basically is they had diagnosed, the only time I missed an ultrasound was that particular time, but our daughter was dealt with what they call trisomy 18, which is more than Down syndrome. It's a lot of different complications. And here I am, I'm maybe 24, 25 years old, and for the first time I really understand what faith's all about. My father found out what it was like at 16 when he became the man of the household, 13-year-old and 8-year-old brother, and now I'm 24, and I'm faced with, which at that point we didn't know what was going to happen. We were basically told that she'd probably be stillborn. Through the faith that we were given, we were in a position where we were able to, from Mary's family and my family, to say, whatever's going to be is going to be. And with that, we had more of a calmness to ourselves. We understood that whatever was in God's hands was going to be best. We were blessed. She was born. She made it through the birth canal, but nobody thought that she would. And then she's lived 1 hour and 2 hours. And we got to about 4 hours, and the doctors were like, wow, she's unbelievable. You're going to probably be able to take her home tomorrow. And we didn't know what to think, because we didn't have a crib. We were basically told that to almost be prepared it was going to be, her not to be born. So as it turned out, she lived 9 hours, and then she did pass. It was the longest 9 hours of my life from a positive standpoint. I don't think I ever spent as much time on one person just looking what she looked like or understanding things. Maybe I was making some things up, whether she was reacting to us. But this was an issue for me that, it was more than about me anymore. And it was about my wife and what she had just gone through to give birth of our beautiful daughter. And we had basically, after 9 hours, we had an angel. So Angel Megan, as we referred to her ever since, crystallized my faith, because a lot of us deal with, when you're dealing with tough times, you can look at it one of two ways. And And at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do, but my faith got me through it. And we looked at it as a positive, that God gave us 9 hours with a beautiful girl. Now we have an angel watching over us. And from that point forward, my faith, although I've gone 18 years of Catholic schools, from first grade through high school, 4 years at BC and 2 years at Notre Dame. Father Bob was here. I think I had more years in Catholic schools than Father Bob was. So, and I was an altar boy. And I was, went to Mass regularly. And, but my faith really was only preparing me at that point for this very traumatic time in my life. And again, it worked out very well for us. We've been blessed since then. We actually were in a position where we had a stillborn situation, our next pregnancy, and then our daughter was born, our third one, our second daughter. And she and my 3 sons since then have all been very, very healthy, and we've been extremely blessed. So for me, when I go through any rough times in life, and I've had bad days like a lot of people, I take basically consolation that I have my daughter looking over me and providing me help. In turn, what I've tried to do is work through my kids and do the same faith. We celebrate our daughter. We've had birthdays for her, since they were kids, and I've tried to instill that to them so they understand, at an early age that, if somebody passes away, it's not a bad thing. Now, it's a tragedy if they pass away early or if they pass through pain and all the rest of that, but we try to use that. And I kind of remember that myself when I said my grandfather died before I was even born. From a positive. I remember going to the cemetery with my grandmother, the old Irish grandma, and it was scary just getting to the cemetery with her because you didn't know if you were going to land there yourself. But it was things that just started in my life that I had that made me understand what was the afterlife and what was more than what we had down here. But in the meantime, I live in a world every day where there's scoreboards and there's stop clocks and everything else. And we want to win. I'm competitive. I don't like to lose. I'm in a position where I want our programs to be as best we can. I want to do it within the rules. I'd much rather lose than be in a situation where, unfortunately, because of the money in particular, although people used to do this anyway, the money's gotten so high now that what is happening in our society with athletics is really splitting apart. We have some people who do it the right way and are still very successful. We have some people who cut corners whenever they can. And not only do they set a bad example for their current student athletes, but for the next generation. And they also put ourselves in a situation where I think people are compromising morals. I think the morals of what we do every day should be the most important thing we have in intercollegiate athletics. We aren't the pros. We aren't the semi-pros. Some teams are, well, I think a little bit more than they should be. But we should be responsible for the young men and women that get in our midst and try to make them the best we can. And beyond being a good athlete, to me, is that we help them grow as young people from the time they get there till the time they leave in ways that I think, quite frankly, are spiritual. Now, I work at a state university. I have to be careful between, church and state, but I don't think there's any concern in regards to just doing the right thing that many people would have a problem. And quite frankly, if they did, I would be happy to defend it. We have some outstanding young men and women with us at FGCU. I'm really proud of one of our best student athletes last year who got our top award. She was also in charge of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so we have a lot of leaders that are doing things in their respective lives that I think epitomize there's a lot more hope for the next generation than a lot of us sometimes feel on a given day when we watch television and we hear their music and wonder what the heck they're doing with their cell phones. But for me, the combination of what I've been able to achieve in my life has been a blessing, but at the same time, the opportunities that I've been given, I think, again, come from, like all of us, a base of our family. My grandparents, my parents, my coaches. I was asked by Mike to talk about faith coaches. My friend Tim Tuffle, our coach, he lived 3 doors down from me. I got a ride from him every day when I made it up on time to school. If not, I had to hitchhike. But he was my football coach and he was my baseball coach. And it was interesting the other night when the Mets won the first round against the Dodgers, I was exchanging some texts with Tim and just mentioned how proud my father was because he coached Tim in the summer and my coach down the street was in regards to, not just because Tim was a good player, but because he was a great person. And I think that's what I think you look at Tim Tebow and you look at some great examples out there and then people try to tear them down because they aren't whatever they want them to be, or the old expression of you build it people and you tear them down. I would much rather be around Tim Tebow and some others who maybe have been more successful in
in their on-field opportunities than what Tim may have done. And I think sometimes even with the way Peyton Manning's been playing, that the Broncos may need him back someday to get to the Super Bowl. But I right now, from my standpoint, again, I take very seriously my responsibility as a surrogate parent, as an athletic director. I think there's some outstanding men and women that are in roles like I am that work with our presidents to try to do it the right way. And I hope that people like yourselves in the community will have confidence that there are a lot of people that care out there. One of the only times I've really had a consternation issue with my dad was he flippantly said one time everybody cheats. And I got really upset because I said, well, that means I cheat. You just said the word everybody, that's inclusive. And I said, I'm going to quit my job before I ever get to a position where I'm putting something like winning over what I'm supposed to do. And I know there's a lot of great people there because it starts with working with outstanding young men and women. John Petrocco was here with his group supporting you guys. His daughter Gina was a 3-9 student, was not only one of our leading players on the field when we first went to the NCAA tournament, but she was voted the most outstanding scholar athlete in the Atlantic Sun for women's soccer. And those types of individuals are far more prevalent than those who are there just for the one and done and get their money and then go to the pros. And individuals who don't appreciate that their life really is going to be more about post-athletics than it is when they play. But there's some folks out there that, unfortunately, in the television and the quick snippets that make things difficult, but overall I think it's really good. So, Mike, I don't know really else if you want from a question and answer period, how you guys want to do it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.